I will now call the meeting to order. It is meeting number 13 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Monday, January 31st, 22. The committee is meeting to study the state of Canada's supply chain. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid form pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room and also remotely on Zoom.
Internal economy on March 10th, 2022. All those attending the meeting in person must wear a mask, except for the members who are at their place during proceedings. I'd like to take a moment to make a few comments for the benefits of the witnesses and the members. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. And for members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Colleagues, appearing before committee today is the Railway Association of Canada. We have Monsieur Marc Brazeau, President and Chief Executive Officer. From the Canadian National Railway Company, we have Monsieur Sébastien Labbé, Vice President, Bulk Rail-Centric Supply Chain. From Canadian Pacific Railway, we have Joan Hardy, Vice President, Sales and Marketing, Grain and Fertilizers. From the Montreal Port Authority, we have Monsieur Daniel Dagenet, Vice President, Operation. From the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association, we have Mr. Bruce Rogers, Executive Director, and Julia Kiselyevich, Director, Policy and Communications. And from Western Canadian Shippers Coalition, we have Monsieur David Montpetit, President and Chief Executive Officer. We are now going to begin the opening remarks with the Railway Association of Canada for 5 minutes. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, honourable members. My name is Marc Brazeau, and I am the President and CEO of the Railway Association of Canada.
The Railway Association of Canada represents some 60 various railroads, both passenger and freight in nature, and transports dozens of millions of persons and about $320 billion in goods throughout the country each year. What's more, we are a vector, an important vector in Canada's economic situation. Our members represent more than 33,000 Canadians at shipping, railway operations, and we take into consideration technology, security, safety, and management. We are very
Industry is safety. Over the past 10 years, rail operators have invested more than $20 billion to ensure the safety and efficiency of their Canadian networks, and they remain fully committed to fostering a robust safety culture. In addition to being reliably safe, rail is also a very efficient and green form of transportation for Canada. Thanks to their substantial and continuous investments in innovation and technology, Canada's railways are more than just economic engines, they are environmental stewards. Railways are among the lowest greenhouse gas emitters in Canada's transportation sector. In 2020, rail accounted for just 3.8% of total transportation GHG emissions. Given the environmental benefits of rail, as well as the railway industry's robust safety record, the need for strategic federal infrastructure investments has never been clearer. The RAC and its members share the belief that growth drives investment. Every year, the Canadian rail industry invests between 20 and 25% of its own revenues back into maintaining and enhancing its 43,000 kilometer network, which is in fact 12% larger than our 38,000 kilometer national highway system. Rail is one of Canada's most capital intensive, vertically integrated industries, owning the rolling stock, equipment, real estate, track, and infrastructure on which they operate. In the last decade alone, members have invested, again, more than $20 billion into the Canadian networks to improve the safety, the resiliency, and the network fluidity, competing directly with the trucking sector that operates on public infrastructure. A competitive business environment is critical to ensure that the rail sector can continue investing in its network and move more goods and more people in the safest and most cost-effective and environmentally sustainable way. Operating safely and creating safe working conditions can sometimes be challenged by extreme weather events such as intense heat, frigid cold, wildfires, floods, storms, and severe winds, just to name a few. Bien que les compagnies de chemin de fer du Canada.
Although Canadian railroad companies have very robust plans to cope with these extreme weather conditions, there are, of course, negative impacts on this essential form of transportation and communication. We have to deal with the consequences of extreme weather events, and the operators and workers of the railroad companies are those who are on the front line to do so. The resilience of our rail network is being tested as never before in view of these climate changes.
Shown through in the response to catastrophic flooding in BC's Lower Mainland and Ontario. RAC members pulled off engineering miracles to get lines shored up, debris cleared, tracks replaced, and trains running again, all while facing incredible challenges and all within a matter of days. Improving our country's trade reputation, growing our economy, protecting our national security interests cannot happen without substantial and sustained federal recapitalization of national trade gateway strategy and funding programs. This includes the creation of federal capital funding program designed specifically to support short-line infrastructure investment, similar to programs that exist in the province of Quebec as well as in the U.S. Simply put, Canada requires a long-term plan for overcoming reliability issues in supply chains and trade corridors, along with proportional investments in infrastructure. This includes enhancing existing trade gateways and corridors, plus the long-term build-out of new marine and inland ports, as well as road, rail, and air transportation assets that will support the freight and passenger flows required for international trade. Thank you, honorable members. I look forward to your questions. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Brazeau.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brazeau. Now we have Mr. Sébastien Labbé. You have the floor, sir. Yes. Hello, everyone.
It's Ian. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to participate in this examination of Canada's supply chains. It's an important topic. As you probably know, there is no more important player in our supply chains than CN Rail. CN enables trade here and abroad. It actually enables Canada's economy, and it does so safely and efficiently. To an extent, the strength of our supply chains is a matter of confidence. Shippers and customers need assurance that the infrastructure required to stimulate and support economic growth is robust and protected. We all need to know strategies are in place to cope with climate change. And we must see collaboration and knowledge transfer between government and industry. All of that is necessary if we are to create capacity and resiliency and ensure our economy flows safely and efficiently. Our supply chain have had moments of great stress in the past few years. One such was the so-called atmospheric rivers that appears over British Columbia last November and the severe flooding that followed. It was a catastrophic emergency, and CN had to respond quickly. During 3 weeks of widespread disruption, CN experienced 58 outages over a 150-mile stretch. The railroad mobilized more than 400 workers, and over 110 pieces of heavy equipment, operating 24/7 to get the rail line back into service. We moved 282,000 cubic yards of rock, earth, and backfill material to restore a damaged location. To put that into perspective, that's more than 25,000 truckloads. We also helped evacuate hundreds of stranded residents, brought urgent medical care to areas cut off by flood, and delivered vital medical supplies. Further, CN was able to use its exclusive access to the port of Prince Rupert to divert shipments bound in and out of Vancouver. It took extra staff and resources, but we ensured customer goods from overseas kept flowing to communities across the North American network. We were able to respond as nimbly and effectively as we did because of the strategic investment we've made in our capacity over the past few years. And we're pretty proud of what we've accomplished. Climate change is actually one of CN's most serious challenges. The floods in BC came after the province was scorched by the hottest weather on earth. Then they were followed by a winter that brought exceptionally brutal cold. CN's extreme weather readiness plans saw us through. Effective emergency response planning, constant risk and vulnerability assessment, and structural and physical engineering adaptation kept cargo moving, along with the deployment of our latest monitoring technology. This is our new reality, but we do see the potential for government to work with industry, particularly, for example, to support the transition to greener technology, including alternative fuels and battery-powered locomotive. One lever we would strongly encourage the government to continue using is the National Trade Corridor Fund. The fund provides vital support across the supply chain. Increasing the funding scope and efficiencies of approval can only strengthen supply chain fluidity. It will quite simply help move more Canadian goods to market. But we're looking forward. We expect to see a good grain crop this year, and we'll stay focused on our customers. Given the current international climate, we know that there will be a high demand for all commodities, particularly for Canadian export. As I said, CN may be one piece of the supply chain, but it's a crucial one. We and our partners will continue innovating and implementing solutions, and welcome any help from our government. Finally, I want to thank you again for this opportunity to appear before you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Labbé.
Thanks, Mr. Labbé.
Hardy from Canadian Pacific Railway. Ms. Hardy, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. I am Joan Hardy, Vice President of Sales and Marketing, Grain and Fertilizers at Canadian Pacific. I appreciate the opportunity to share CP's perspective. The first point I would make is that there is no one single supply chain in Canada. Each commodity has its own unique, interdependent, and complex supply chain that links the producer with the final end user. In the grain context, this includes every distinct element in the chain that connects the farmer to the grain company, to the railway, to the port terminal for export. Each of our customers has a unique supply chain, and CP is just one element in the overall system. CP is undertaking historic levels of capital investment to improve safety, increase capacity, and enhance the resiliency of our rail network. Safety is foundational to everything we do at CP. We have led the industry with the lowest train accident frequency in North America for the past 16 consecutive years. Over the past decade, CP has invested more than $14.3 billion into our infrastructure, technology, and rolling stock. This includes our $500 million investment in new high-capacity grain hopper cars. Our capital program complements investments made by our customers and governments, including projects funded through the National Trade Corridor Fund. CP supports federal investments in projects that improve supply chain efficiency and resiliency. We applaud the government for committing an additional $450 million to the NTCF in the recent budget. Unfortunately, it often takes years for projects to get approval under the NTCF. We encourage Transport Canada to move with more urgency to commit funding for projects that can provide immediate, tangible improvements for Canada's supply chains. Measuring the strength of Canada's supply chains is fundamentally a question of resiliency. To what extent can our supply chains endure extreme events or disruptions? Over the past year, CP's resiliency was tested several times. In BC alone, we had to overcome extreme wildfires, flooding, and catastrophic infrastructure damage, all while managing high COVID absenteeism. The tragedies of last year's wildfire season in BC are well known. CP went to extraordinary efforts to maintain safe operations through the BC interior during this time. We marshaled significant resources to protect our infrastructure and keep trains running. This included constructing 4 fire suppression trains and bringing in industrial firefighters from as far away as Texas. Then in late November, an extraordinary atmospheric river slammed into BC, causing destructive flooding along the Thompson and Fraser River canyons. The historic rains caused 32 separate track washouts on our main line and an 8-day service outage on the most critical part of our network that connects North America with the Port of Vancouver. CN was down for over 2 weeks during this period, which amplified the devastating impact to the rail supply chains servicing the port. We worked closely with federal, provincial, local authorities, and Indigenous communities to restore service and deliver essential goods such as water, food, and medicines to impacted communities in proximity to our network. Following the restoration of service, we took a balanced approach to the restart for all commodities, which allowed the rail system to recover within a few weeks. Supply chain resiliency also requires the railway to be nimble in order to respond to shifting market dynamics and customer demand. A powerful example is CP's response this winter to surging demand for the transportation of US corn and grain into the Canadian prairies for cattle feed. CP responded to the unprecedented demand by working with our customers to create a whole new supply chain for the delivery of cattle feed into Canada, shipping over 26,000 cars of feed to date, more than 20 times the prior year volume. Recovering from natural disasters and moving swiftly in concert with our customers are examples of how CP has demonstrated its remarkable resiliency over the past year. CP and our railroaders have overcome incredible obstacles to keep the rail system functioning in the service of our customers and the broader Canadian economy. And we are not just sitting idly by and waiting for the next disruption. We are continuously identifying locations on our network where infrastructure improvements can strengthen that resiliency. In BC, we are improving our storm runoff infrastructure by reinforcing and reestablishing slopes, installing new culverts, constructing new rock and debris fences. We are also investing in track and signaling at Cisco Bridge to enhance connectivity with the CN, which will improve our ability to keep trains running if there is an outage in the directional running zone between Hope and Kamloops. In 2023, we plan to construct 3 new bridges to improve resiliency in our BC network. We will also be working with Transport Canada to advance projects under the NTCF that can strengthen resiliency of Canada's supply chains. I would be pleased to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hardy. Next, from the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association, we have Mr. Rogers, as well as Ms. Kuselyevich. I'm trying to get that pronounced correctly. I hope I am. The floor is now yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for inviting Bruce and me to speak on this critical issue. Monsieur le Président et Madame et Messieurs.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, on behalf of the International Forwarders Association, I thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
This committee, that you're investing time on this critical subject. Our membership appreciates the committee's inquiry, and we look forward to recommendations you might have. If you're an importer, such as a retailer, or an exporter, such as a Canadian-based manufacturer, transportation and border efficiency are critical. You likely don't want to spend time on all the complex details of transportation and border regulations as you do business in many countries. Instead, you hire one of Canada's freight forwarding companies making up our membership, allowing their 20,000 plus employees to take control of your products and move them by the best mode of transport at the best price. A significant percentage of Canada's freight is transported by forwarders, which means our membership is by far the largest shipper in the country. Our members track the supply chains in and out of the country with a very intense real-time scrutiny. From the witnesses you've already met, it's clear the committee understands that supply chain is still in a lot of trouble today. Consider this, it takes about 22 days for a ship to travel the 10,000 kilometers from Hong Kong to Vancouver. But as recently as last Friday, the shipping company Maersk reported that the average wait time for a berth in Port of Vancouver is still around 4 weeks, and yard congestion is at 120%. Consider that a port's optimal operational level is closer to around 80%, and the picture becomes clearer. 2 key factors determine how competitive we are in supply chains: regulatory process and infrastructure.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rogers, I believe you're on mute.
My sincere apologies. Through the pandemic, the Canadian Border Services Agency made efforts to reduce inspection delays, and these measures were very welcome. But our members are still facing a nightmarish situation. Not long ago, we got a message from one of our members illustrating the situation. A specific container was identified for CBSA inspection. This was on October 23rd. The container did not get to the inspection location until November 24th. CBSA did the inspection on December 2nd, which took less than 1 day to complete. The next day, it was picked up and returned to the port. The customs released it for delivery on the 4th of January. So the process took 73 days to complete a 1-day CBSA inspection. This example illustrates that even if CBSA move as quickly as they can, the system is still terribly blocked. This type of delay results in significant demurrage and detention costs to the importer and ultimately the Canadian consumer. In this particular situation, the ocean carrier charged the importer $8,730 for demurrage. One of the most important developments in the pandemic were measures the regulatory authorities implemented to reduce delays. These were very welcome and demonstrated exactly the flexibility and scalability in our supply chain so many of your witnesses have called for. I urge the committee to call witnesses from the Canadian Border Services Agency to outline what they did and what were the implications of their shortcuts in executing their mandates. Indicate whether we can keep these accelerated processes or do they plan to reverse the steps they took. What other measures, such as better interdepartmental data sharing, are they implementing? The power of IT systems to facilitate trade is considerable, and we need aggressive action in this area. What measures exist for more cooperation with American border authorities is warranted, especially in times of crisis. Ultimately, the ability of the system to respond to increased volumes and maintain competitiveness relies on more modern infrastructure. Recent announcements by the government are encouraging if they are implemented efficiently. Unfortunately, we have seen examples of promises not kept or of seamless, endless reviews. The studies about the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project in Vancouver began in 2011. We still have no assurance this project will proceed. One particular egregious example, in 2015, the federal budget promised the purchase of a large-scale imaging system for rapid inspections at the new Tawasin Container Examination Facility in BC. Not only has the system not been installed, we have spent years trying to get an answer from the department about its status. I hope the committee will use its authority to get some kind of explanation on the delay. You have had witnesses urging a change to our competitive law to prevent ocean shipping firms from organizing cartels. We would endorse that action. The Shipping Conferences Exemption Act is long overdue for amendment. Across the world, many countries have announced that they will no longer permit these monopolistic practices, and it's time Canada made the same decision. Let me just wrap up our opening statement by saying this: effective supply chains are a benefit to everyone in every region, in every walk of life. I hope this committee is able to make a big contribution to the effort to improve ours. We look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kitselyevich, as well as Mr. Rogers. Next, we have from the Western Canadian Shippers Coalition, Monsieur Montpetit. Monsieur Montpetit, vous avez 5 minutes. À vous la parole.
You have 5 minutes, Mr. Montpetit. You have the floor.
All right, great. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Standing Committee. On behalf of the Western Canadian Shippers Coalition, WCSC, I would like to thank you for the invitation to participate in the session. My name is Dave, and I am the President and CEO. WCSC is based in Western Canada and represents shippers from multiple resource commodity sectors, many of whom are completely dependent on one railway. Our membership includes some of the largest Canadian and North American shippers in these sectors. Collectively, members spend tens of thousands, or members provide tens of thousands of direct and indirect jobs in communities across Canada, ship billions of dollars worth of product annually, and spend over $3.5 billion on total transportation. The point of commonality of our members is a reliance on our market dominant providers of rail, freight, truck, and port transportation. Shippers have faced significant supply chain disruptions since the fall of 2019, following CN Rail's strike and service issues related to unusual weather conditions. While in recovery mode in 2020, blockades disrupted railroad lines across Canada. Transport Canada issued a slow order in response to a train derailment in Saskatchewan, and supply chains and operations began experiencing additional stress due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The downward spiral continued in 2021 with extreme heat, the BC wildfires, and flooding, bringing the supply chain in some areas in Western Canada to a standstill or crawl. CP's labor disruption in March of this year and the effect of the war on Ukraine is further testing the resilience of an already strained supply chain. As a result, WCC members are operating in a very challenging business environment. Supply chain shortages in all modes, rail, trucking, port, containers at port, increased costs, scheduling issues, and shipping delays have taken a toll. The driver shortage in the truck industry is not a new phenomenon. Class 1s have drastically reduced headcounts in active equipment in 2020 and 21 and have been slow to bring people and equipment back. In many areas, they're again stretched too thin and to meet demand and lack the resiliency to manage normal operating procedures. In fact, given the system-wide rail service issues resulting from a combination of weather-related crises, which is no fault of the railway at all, and they did a great job in bringing everything back, I must commend them on that, and a personnel and equipment deficit, some of our members have been forced to take temporary plant shutdowns and operate at reduced capacity for prolonged periods of time. In addition, on the impact on the member companies, these pressures are damaging confidence in the reliability of Canada as a supplier of goods and resources. Canada's competitiveness and reputation as a trading nation depend on our ability to get products to market. So we need to look ahead. WCSC believes that a comprehensive supply chain review is necessary to determine precisely what Canada's major trade corridors will require in terms of maximizing performance of our roads, rails, and ports. This includes determining current and future value, our future capacity, first and last mile efficiencies, and bottlenecks in congested areas such as the Vancouver Lower Mainland and Northern Alberta. Other areas that we suggest focusing on include contingency planning. The supply chain must be better prepared in 2022 to moving forward for potential events such as climate, the ones that we've already seen before, and other disruptions such as strikes, blockades, pandemics, and now a war. WCC recommends regional, federal, and provincial task forces be organized similar to what was successfully put in place in 2021 during the BC flood. Resiliency. Trade corridors are under much strain, and in some regions have begun to break down. A comprehensive review in all modes is to fully identify these challenges necessary, including looking at bottlenecks, underutilized corridors, and identify opportunities to move national trade corridor funding and infrastructure funding focus accordingly. Seasonal versus winter planning. The narrative and direction for planning needs to shift, as what we currently rely on is not working. WCSC suggests a combination of climate event planning, other trade corridor disruptions, which I described earlier on, and seasonal fluctuations of commodities and manufactured goods in the supply chain need to be considered. Basically, a roadmap. Finally, data and metrics. More regionally detailed real-time information is required. Capacity data is needed to provide a benchmark for the trade corridors, for we can understand what the trade corridors can handle. Shippers are responsible for internally building chain visibility dashboards and need regionally detailed metrics to compare the performance in supply chain. And lastly, we will be looking at and prioritizing some future legislation moving forward, including reviewing what was put forward in Bill C-49 and looking at areas and recommendations that were not previously considered. We're also looking at the Port Modernization Act and things we can do around including mechanisms similar to what we have in place for rail, looking at excessive fees and charges, and perhaps looking at some changes to the Act to include some mechanisms for shippers to respond to that. And lastly, looking at the Canadian Transportation Act and wondering when will the next review be. We're going to be approaching 10 years here in the next couple. We're already at probably 8 since it was last launched, and it's something we should consider. I want to thank everybody for their time and look forward to some questions coming up here in the future. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Montpetit.
Thank you, Mr. Montpetit. Now we have Mr. Dagenet from the Montreal Port Authority. You have 5 minutes. You have the floor, Mr. Dagenet. Thank you very much. I thank you for giving us the opportunity to speak to the committee. But before I begin, I want to thank the government as well for listening to us and also the members for being interested in the resilience of the supply chain. I am Danielle Dagenet from the Montreal Port Authority, and I represent the containers that flow up and down the St. Lawrence. We are an essential link in the Canadian supply chain, which contributes to Canada's economic dynamism. Before the pandemic, there were 2 work stoppages that affected how we operated and affected the volume of work that was done. Today we have a diversified platform that supports a logistic ecosystem that represents 6,300 businesses, and we deal in some $100 billion worth of trade. Although we had to deal with work stoppages and difficulties, we have been able to catch up and do the necessary to reduce the consequences for our clients. What we have to do is something very simple. We have to load and unload all our containers. And so we want to be able to allow for a very fluid operation by rail as well as by sea. We work with our partners, but we need the essential aid of the government. Cooperation for the port ecosystem and the supercluster that is AI-based has allowed us to produce a smart trucking portal, which allows for a rapid, quick processing of the goods and freight as they arrive. During COVID-19, we were able to operate, and the Port of Montreal was able to handle some 1.15 million containers because of the fluidity of our operation. We want to look at labor infrastructure. Sorry, Mr. Dagenet, could I ask you please to slow down just a little? The interpreters are having difficulty keeping up with you, sir. Thank you. Employment in the labor sector and infrastructure sectors are very important, and they evolve. They are allowing us to meet the challenges, the technological challenges of tomorrow. For some 2 years now, we have been responding to crises, but that bears witness to our resiliency and our ability to carry on. We do need infrastructure, that additional infrastructure, but we want to be able to green our operations and grow them for just-in-case possibilities. We want to also maintain our inventory, and therefore we want to be a solid ally for all businesses. This strategic forward thinking is allowing for cooperation between levels of government, and that is to the advantage of everyone. Supply chains that are low in GHG emissions are good for everyone. In terms of bioenergy, we can reduce the emissions that are related to our platforms by using modern equipment. And that is part of a key role in the energy crisis. The government can help the transition in energy by making the steps that are necessary. If we have this supply chain and if there is a weak link, we have to compensate for that. Access to data, digitization, cooperation are essential. We have to build a framework where previsibility, the ability to predict, is foremost. And sharing areas is also important for the federal government to make better decisions. We need better information. To conclude, I believe that the government has an essential role to play in terms of resiliency. And it is by working together with the federal government that we will be able to meet the challenges of tomorrow in terms of labor, in terms of innovation, in terms of greening our industry. And that is what I thank you for listening to me for.
Our questioning today, we have Ms. Marilyn Gladue. Ms. Gladue, you have 6 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses. I'm very excited to talk to every one of you. I have a huge list of questions, so we'll start with Mr. Brazeau. You spoke about short line infrastructure, and I know it's not in super shape in Canada. And you mentioned that the US has a program. Could you expand on that and what the Canadian government ought to do to help that short line infrastructure?
Yes, thank you for that question, because it is an issue that has been ongoing for some time in terms of the differences between the US and Canada when it comes to support for short lines. You know, today we have CN and CP that are with us, the two class ones in Canada. You know, they have the capacity, they have the ability to reinvest in their infrastructure at a rate that's fairly high. As I mentioned, 20 to 25% of the revenues on an annual basis go back into supporting their infrastructure renewal. Unfortunately, the short lines don't have the room to make that kind of investment. They don't have that capability. And what we have been advocating for, Ms. Gladue, is a similar dedicated program that exists in the United States. These are state and federal programs aimed at providing support specifically to short line railways in order to ensure that they continue to reinvest in their infrastructure and their rolling stock, in order for them to really keep up with the demands that they see in that first last mile connection back to the class ones in the US. And we believe that program or those types of programs have proven to be very beneficial to short lines in the US. And we've been advocating for similar programs in Canada. I will give a shout out to
Are they tax incentives or capital incentives?
They're a combination of several incentives. There are tax incentives, there are capital project incentives, but there is direct funding as well. No different than if a short line was to apply to the National Trade Corridor Fund. They would be entitled to have funds or projects funded by the federal government with some matching contribution from the short lines. Unfortunately, the short lines are not getting a lot of support through the National Trade Corridor Fund, and that's why we believe that there should be a dedicated fund for short lines, similar to the U.S. and similar to what we see in Quebec as well, because Quebec has a couple of programs that do benefit our short line members in that province.
Good. Excellent. And now to Ms. Hardy, I want to talk about the fertilizer situation in Canada, because we know that with the Russian aggression, we're seeing a real problem. Canadians ordered their fertilizer. The Russians got their money for it. Now Canadians are being hit with a tariff, even though the Russians already have their money. And then there's a number of other things that are related to supply chain. So can you comment on what you think the federal government ought to be doing other than exempting the tariffs for product ordered before March the 2nd?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Gladue, for the question. Certainly, the movement of fertilizer is very important for our Canadian producers, for U.S. producers as well, for the potash that's moving out of Canada, and important for the world, because so much of the potash that the world needs is going to come from Canada. Any steps that the government can take to ensure that Canadian potash and Canadian fertilizers remain viable, can move in and out of the country easily, are very important. We have, we're certainly supporting some of the most important fertilizer producers worldwide, moving the product out with Campotex, Mosaic, and Nutrien. And so your support to those industries is very important. Thank you.
Okay. Super. And now we'll go to Mr. Rogers. I'm looking at the capacity limitations in the system and the pinch points, and you talked about some of those being waiting for a birth and issues with the regulatory processes and infrastructure. What specifically could the federal government do to help with this wait time for birth and the regulatory burden that we're seeing?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, the Roberts Bank Terminal Expansion Project out of Vancouver has been on the books since 2011. If that gets approved now, it won't happen until sometime into the beginning to mid part of 2030. It's just taking too long. 20 years to put in, when we identify that we have a potential critical situation with volume and congestion occurring, we can't wait 20 years for these projects to get approved and to be implemented and from a supply chain perspective. So I would say that's probably one of the most critical. And that just allows for berthing. So it allows for the offloading of the containers. The other issues we have, as we've just experienced out of Western Canada into Vancouver, we've been landlocked out there since probably the end of August of last year. Now the government has assisted with funding that we can get additional land in Vancouver, so we can park some empty containers. That's been welcome relief. just to relieve some of the congestion with what's happening out of the West Coast.
And with respect to the CBSA that you mentioned, what is the issue? Is it that there's not enough CBSA officers to do the inspection, or what is it that we need to do? Do we need a more streamlined process overall?
When in 2015, the government approved the new examination facility out of Vancouver. There was originally only one. They approved the second one at Tsawwassen. That went in, and it was under the premise that it would have large-scale imaging, that it could do X-ray of the containers, really to facilitate the examination process. That has been tied up as well. We have put a request in, access for information, trying to determine what is the reason for the delay. And again, it's been 2 years now. We don't have a response from our initial inquiry on that one either. But that would facilitate a quicker examination process through that facility. Right now, it's very, very labor intensive. And because of that, it's adding delays as well as adding additional cost to have the examinations performed. So additional technology would be welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. Thank you, Ms. Gladue. Next, we have Mr. Chahal. Mr. Chahal, you have 6 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses today providing testimony on this important study. My first questions, I want to get into a little bit on how the most recent lockdowns we've seen in China have affected our supply chain. And I'd like to, Ms. Kuzelvicek, I believe, sorry if I pronounced your name, could provide any insights on that and the impact on the shippers.
Yes, Kuzelievich, Julia.
Kuzelievich.
Yes, thank you. Just what we have seen coming across our desk at the association over the past 2 years of COVID is that the COVID zero policy in China, what they require is quarantining and locking down of entire ports, for example, even with a few cases. And so you have several things just kind of creating a domino effect in the supply chain, which is you have a port shutdown, lack of employees to service the outgoing ships. And so the ocean carriers have to recreate a schedule. And as a result, they will take capacity out of the system. They will start avoiding certain ports or, depending on where they consider a priority, they will stop calling at various ports. Canceling sailings is the term. So then you end up with situations where you have ghost ships, which are trying to make up the chartered ghost ships that are appearing with no berth available at ports, or you have just delays in the transit, adding more time to the transit time and the expected arrival of the ship, which just creates a domino effect down the chain with regard to the inland delivery of the goods and the availability of staff to offload the ships.
What can be done to mitigate these impacts? You've talked about so many, or how can we source from other countries better? And you also mentioned that a supply chain still in trouble today. If you could just elaborate more on that.
Well, we've witnessed a compounding effect, and COVID was, even before COVID, we were in trouble, whether it was weather-related delays, which occur every year, and we expect those, which, low temperatures in the winter require slower trains across the prairies, for example. And to a large degree, a lot of those things are expected, and we deal with them, and there's workarounds, but it was just a compounding effect of starting with blockades, then COVID, then all of the resulting domino effects from the lack of staff and capacity taken out of the system on the air side, for example. And then you were dealing as well with the phenomenon of consumers purchasing because they couldn't travel, so they're purchasing online, and you had an influx of volumes. And although those are probably temporary issues, it really strained the supply chain to be able to see that, it doesn't take long when you have a blockade, when you have a strike, when you have a weather delay. it does not take long for whatever resilience we have to be beaten out of the supply chain. And so those became acute issues that we were able to observe over the last 2 years.
Thank you. I'm going to move over to the Western Canadian Shippers Association and Mr. Montpetit. Your opening remarks, you talked specifically about a comprehensive supply chain review. Could you provide some insights on what you'd like to see within that review and where that review would be focused?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And that's a good question because we've been pushing for this for several years now. The focus would be in what we had suggested and continue to suggest is looking at all modes. It's not just necessarily rail or specifically be rail, port, trucking, and taking a whole holistic view of the supply chain itself, looking for opportunities, looking for inefficiencies, looking for bottlenecks. And most likely you would have to bring in third parties to do that in combination with information that would probably be provided by the railways, shippers, provinces via road, short lines, et cetera, But it basically is a holistic review of the supply chain because I don't believe we've ever done one. And if we haven't done one, it's been years. Maybe it was 40 years ago. Don't remember exactly, but it's been a long time. And to all the points here, a combination of the comments that Mr. Brazeau made, et cetera, the supply chain has been beaten up. The railways have been beaten up. Shippers have been beaten up. We've been just hammered with weather events and blockades and et cetera. I've never seen anything like this in all the time that I've been doing this. So my question is to government is what can you do and what visibility and what funding can we transfer into an overall review? Because before we spend infrastructure dollars, we need to know where we spend them. There's been some good dollars spent already, and I think Ms. Hardy made a comment, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, about how long infrastructure projects take to have legs. This is going to take a long time. But in order to spend the money and spend it wisely, we need to understand where we're spending the money and why first. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. You said specifically bottlenecks in the Lower Mainland and Northern Alberta. What were you referring to in Northern Alberta?
It's just the infrastructure that's actually up there. There's speed limits coming out of the Fort McMurray area, and there's a lot of congestion and traffic there. And there's continually, my members are continually struggling out there for service, and they're also struggling to get additional warehouse space when required. So it has been and continues to be one of the major bottlenecks that my members face.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chahal. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Montpetit.
Thank you, Mr. Montpetit. Next, we have Mr. Barcelo Duval. You have the floor. 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. My question is for Mr. Labbé. You won't be surprised with what we've seen very recently in the news, on CNN and on the French news. Your business made a choice with respect to its board of directors to have 0 francophones on the board. Do you think that this is a normal choice? Wouldn't you agree with me that for most Quebecers, this is a slap in the face? Indeed. We are aware of the situation in CN. The Vice Chair, Executive Vice Chair, Mr. Champagne, has communicated with respect to this with our directors, and there will be discussions to address the situation. Also, Mr. Charest, who is on the board of directors. I understand that the situation will be corrected, but when you look at the information syllabus, there were 3 vacant positions, and those 3 were filled by people who did not speak French. So, given that was this done consciously by your corporation, or certainly the CEO should be someone who understands Quebec and speaks French. Was that not heard? And also, we want to. Do you not agree that there should be someone who understands French? Are you the only person who speaks French in the administration? Well, as I say, this situation will, in coming months, be settled. I have noted that you expressed yourself 100% in English in your opening remarks, but there was a letter from the union, the Teamsters Union, that spoke about a climate of fear for those people who work in French, who are unilingual French, and who face reprisals because they don't understand or speak English in the corporation. And that makes their work difficult, if not impossible. What do you say to that about the Francophone fact in the CN? I've been working for many years in Quebec. I'm now in Alberta. I've always been able to have communication in both French and English in CN, but I express myself in English now a bit more, perhaps. Do you think that someone who is bilingual or a unilingual English would be better positioned to have a position in CN? I can't speak to that because, of course, there is customer relations, and we also deal with the United States. And since you've been in your position, do you feel that there has been an improvement in French at the corporation? Since the 24 years I've been here, there has been some improvement. There are communications in English and French, and some unions, of course, use French. As Vice President, you are aware and are part of most of the important decisions that are made at CN. Have you heard about the unhappy situation expressed by the unions? Do you not think that there should be improvement with respect to the place that French has in your corporation? Not so much on my side. I'm more on the business side, but that would be human relations or relations with the various unions. So this is not a subject matter that is discussed amongst the vice presidents, not with me. And do you not think that there should be some improvement at CN? I'm not saying the contrary. I think that that is really a matter of communications. There's always a way to try to do better. When the control center, the CN center, was closed in Montreal and moved to Edmonton, many employees said that there were problems with French language services that resulted from that change. Were they just fears that were spread about? Do you share those fears that there would be a difficulty for bilingualism? From what I understand, I'm not aware of any situation that this problem was experienced by employees or clients. I see it in the media, but I deal with clients every day, and it's not something that has been brought up with me. And for you, would that not be a risk to the supply chain, to the security and safety of the supply chain, if you don't have enough people who are able to speak French and communicate in French? Well, I don't know. Perhaps there are sufficient people or not who can communicate in French. But those people who work in French, who have to work in French, and they can't do it, have you been a witness to that? Are you saying that the union is mistaken in this? I can't comment on that. I don't have all the information to which they have access. Okay. So you don't know what more can be done to settle the situation at CN? I have the impression that you do not see the problem, and we, on the other hand, see red lights that are flashing off and on here. I know that the situation is taken seriously, but I'm not aware of the next steps that will be taken. But the subject matter has been brought up to the Board of Directors with Mr. Flynn's comments. Thank you, Mr. Labbé. Thank you, Mr. Barcelo-Duval.
Mr. Bachrach, the floor is now yours. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our witnesses today. I'd like to pick up where Mr. Barcelou-Duval left off with the question to Mr. Lab. If I follow the discussion properly, am I to understand that there are currently no Francophones on CN's board?
Currently, that is the case, yes.
Okay, and what message do you think that sends to the Francophones that work for your company here in Canada?
Well, as I said, it's been recognized since the departure of Mr. Charest. So Mr. Finn acknowledged that this will be corrected within the year.
By the end of the year?
No, in the current year, following a few months when there's a couple of departures from the board.
Okay, and what does corrected look like to CN?
Oh, I cannot answer that.
Okay, what's your personal opinion on the number of Francophones that would be appropriate on the board to reflect the place of the French language in Canadian society?
Well, I think we have to look at various factors for representation on the board, and French would be one of them. But you could look at all the types of diversity that would be considering, whether it's a geographic or thought or language.
Okay, and final question, do you feel that CN has adequately reflected the importance of the French language in Canada in the makeup of its board and its corporate leadership in the past?
Well, we're just coming out of corporate leadership being heavily French and bilingual, I guess. So I think it's always a mix of the big picture, the total picture of leadership.
Okay, I'm gonna switch over to some questions for Mr. Brazeau, and I was struggling with who to ask this question to. We've heard several of our witnesses today talk about extreme weather events caused by climate change and the impacts on the supply chain. And I'm curious, Mr. Brazeau, you represent a number of big rail companies that work in Canada, and I'm curious about the conversation about extreme weather events and global climate change within your industry. Perhaps the question is, has your industry seen increasing costs due to extreme weather events? And what work is being done to understand this trend? And what costs do you anticipate are going to be borne by your industry moving forward in say, the coming decade?
Yeah, the short answer is there has been an increased cost as a result of extreme climate change and extreme conditions. That is something that all the railways are planning for in their contingency plans. One of the things that I think that the railways have been doing more and more of is reaching out to other subject matter experts in meteorological changes or extreme weather patterns. There's analytics that are being used. There's short-term and long-term forecasting that's now in place. There's contingency plans that are done on a regional basis as well. So I think that's something that the railways are all taking seriously. It's all part of their future planning. And yes, there's a significant amount of investment and a significant amount of allocation of time and people's resources to make sure that we can plan as best as we can and anticipate as quickly as possible when those events occur.
Thank you, Mr. Brazeau. Now, you mentioned, the use of subject matter experts. Does the rail sector follow the work of the IPCC and some of the modeling and projections that are being done globally in terms of the implications of global climate change? And can you provide any sense of the magnitude of costs that global climate change and extreme weather could pose for the rail sector in Canada?
Well, first of all, the railways are taking advantage of every information that's available out there. One of the things that we also do is we work closely with Canadian University. The University of Alberta, for example, has a very good rail-focused research group, and there's a lot of interaction between the University of Alberta and the rail research people there and our network. We also work closely with our U.S. counterparts. There's a dedicated R&D and training facility in Boulder, Colorado, that allows all of our railways to test equipment and to test equipment under different conditions. So that is something that, again, I am certainly very confident that no stones are being left unturned here by the railways. And in terms of the cost, I can't give you a specific number, but I can tell you that those costs are becoming increasingly significant. But that's also part of ensuring that the railways are reinvesting back in those areas where we're going to have the best impact and the best ability to respond to those challenges.
Thanks, Mr. Brazeau. Now, I was noting an article from 2020 that indicated that CN has supported the recommendations of the task force on climate-related financial disclosure. Are you familiar with these recommendations, and are those recommendations that are supported by the Railway Association of Canada?
Well, I can tell you that and I mentioned in my opening remarks, rail represents only 3.5% of GHG emissions in the transportation network in Canada. However, we have specific targets in place with Transport Canada on locomotive emissions, and those targets are in place on an annual basis. And all of our members.
And Mr. Brazeau, I don't think this deals specifically with emissions from the sector. But with two other sources of financial risk. One is that your industry ships a huge volume of fossil fuel products at a time when Canada and the rest of the world are working to transition off of those. That represents an area of financial risk. The second area of financial risk in my mind is the financial risk related to the costs that are going to be borne by continued extreme weather events along the various rail corridors in Canada. Are those areas of risk that are communicated to investors in rail companies? Are you familiar?
Well, first of all, the railways have a common carrier obligation. So we have an obligation to carry all resources, all goods. That's in the Canada Transportation Act. So we don't pick and choose what we carry. We're there. We fulfill that common carrier obligation every day. In terms of the actual cost, again, I can't speak.
The question wasn't cost. The question was risk.
Well, the risk
Thank you, Mr. Brazeau and Mr. Bachrach. Unfortunately, the time is up. Next, we have Mr. Genereux. Mr. Genereux, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses, for being with us today. So I have 5 minutes, so I'm going to try to get through one question quickly with a few of the witnesses. May I start with you, Mr. Brazeau. Judging from your opening comments, the biggest reason for supply chain disruption was catastrophic flooding in BC. Am I correct?
Extreme weather events, for sure. There was extreme heat throughout the prairies in the summer.
I'll come back to you, but I'm going to try to do it quickly if we can. To Ms. Hardy, same question. Judging by your opening comments, the biggest reason for supply chain disruption was BC flooding, correct?
Flooding and fires, yes.
Okay. Mr. Labbé, same question. The biggest reason for supply chain disruption, judging by your comments, was BC flooding?
Flooding, fires, and also extreme cold for a couple months.
Great. Mr. Montpetit, from judging by your opening comments, the biggest reason for supply chain disruption was, you said, the war in Ukraine?
No, I didn't say that. No, I said floods, fires, extreme heat, cold.
Perfect.
No, and also blockades that really impacted things back in 2020.
Okay, sorry for putting words in your mouth, but that's helpful. And then lastly, Mr. Dagenet, the biggest reason for supply chain disruption, according to your opening comments, was work stoppages?
Work stoppages and the pandemic, indeed.
Okay, interesting. So of all those witnesses, there was Mr. Dagenet, who's the only one that indicated the pandemic. And I only bring this up, Mr. Chair, because through the summit that the minister had, he said that the biggest disruption was COVID-19 solely as the biggest disruption in the supply chain. So I think it's important for this committee, particularly the analysts, to hear that as we go into the final report. So now I want to turn some questions over to Ms. Kaselevich. You indicated in your opening comments that it was 4 weeks backlogged in the Port of Vancouver, and they're at 120% capacity. Did I get those numbers correct?
Yes, I think Ms. Zeldovich is having some technical difficulty. It's Bruce Rogers, and I'll address that concern. That was reported by one of the carriers. The carrier was Maersk, and they indicate they put out a daily report, or sorry, a weekly report of port status in North America. They've indicated from their perspective, the port is they're having a dwell of about 4 weeks to get into the port, and the port is 120% congested.
Okay. Great. And then, so I guess that's what we heard last week I guess it wasn't last week. It would have been 3 weeks ago now, was from the Port of Vancouver. They indicated that there was 9 weeks, about 9 weeks, and then the port would be back to business as usual. They were confident in those numbers. I was a bit surprised when I heard that, just noting all of the number of barges out in the English Bay, for example. Curious if you, and I see Ms. Kozelovich has joined us now again, if either of you have comments on that statement from the port.
That would surprise us equally. Again, there's issues going on in China now where you've got the shutdown, so that's affecting vessel departures. And as was mentioned earlier, some of the vessels are canceled sailings or blank sailings, that they're not moving anymore. I read a report this morning that exports are down 40%. So if those exports are down coming into Canada, that will allow Canada an opportunity to clean out the backlog that they have today. But I would say that is very short term. Once that part opens again and traffic resumes, I would anticipate we're going to be back to further congestion throughout the summer.
So I guess some of the solutions that were pitched were advanced technology, artificial intelligence, which are obviously longer term investments. Curious if there's anything that you guys can give us in the last 20 seconds I have as indications of what could be done urgently to get some of that backlog addressed.
What we need is more berthing, so we can handle more ships through the Port of Vancouver. We need infrastructure projects. We are landlocked in Vancouver. We need better roads, better access points, and able to allow cargo to flow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Genereux. Next, we have Mr. Badaway. Mr. Badaway, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm going to try and get through this in 5 minutes. But I do want to offer the witnesses the opportunity to send in testimony following this testimony. We have an ability to pass on a lot of what you would otherwise say here, but also following this meeting, anything you want to add to us, so that way it gets captured within the analyst report. So with that, I'll preface my comments by saying this, and this goes to Mr. Motpetit's comments with respect to strategy, and of course attached to strategy is plans of action. We have already established an interim report on establishing a Canadian transportation logistics strategy, about 31 recommendations attached to that report. We are doing a supply chain study right now within this committee presently. We have the ports modernization review that we're also doing. With all that said, and with respect to maximizing multimodal ports, it's incumbent upon us to take all those strategies and ensure that all the recommendations, including the one that we're doing now, are all brought together to do exactly what Mr. Motpetit is saying, is to have that strategy established and, of course, attached to the recommendations that we receive from you and others, action plans. With that, Budget 2022 has signaled by, in this case, by Minister Alghabra, that the NTCF funding is more going to be directed towards supply chains, so much so that the budget also identifies that he might change the name of the NTCF fund that reflects the priority of investments towards supply chains. And with that, once again, when we look at the national, in particular, the strategic direction that you're taking, that need to make it more robust is critical. When we look at capacity, we look at integrating distribution logistics. Once again, critical that we receive not only in 5 minutes or at this meeting recommendations from you folks, but obviously a lot more that I'm hoping that will follow this meeting. I know in the Niagara region, for example, right on the Great Lakes, we've established the Niagara Ports Trade Corridor in partnership with the Hamilton-Oshawa Port Authority, as well as 3 municipalities. A multimodal hub that takes advantage of the Welland Canal, main and short line rail, air, road, and of course ultimately the location of the Niagara region. The Hamilton-Oshawa Port Authority has now been delegated management of certain lands within the Welland Canal Corridor, and some of which in partnership with the private sector as well as other modes of transportation. So I guess two questions that I would like answered, if time permits here, but as well following this meeting and correspondence you can send to us, is, and this goes to Mr. LeBay's comments with respect to capacity and resilience, is to establish the capacity and resilience as well as the fluidity. Does CN and others entertain opportunities to partner with the public and private sectors? How do you do that? When do you do that? Secondly, to Mr. Brazeau, same question. Mr. Montpetit, same question, especially as it relates to, from Mr. LeBay's side, shunting, expanding those operations to then therefore have the ability to not only expand operations for CN, but also the multimodal aspect of it. Promoting further economic development, to Mr. Brazeau, to your comments with respect to that multimodal network, and to Mr. Montpetit's comments, especially as it relates to the infrastructure investments. How, what recommendations do you have, especially as it relates to the former NTCF fund, now supply chain fund? How do you see that rolling out? We'll start off with Mr. LeBay.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you for the comment and question. So we're always open to work with all the customers, stakeholders, and agencies, government to improve the supply chain. As John Hardy was saying earlier, it is not one supply chain, but multiple supply chains that have to coexist. And we're working a lot right now to make sure that we have fluidity on all the lanes with all the commodities. So we're always open to work. And as for the NTCF fund, it's a great initiative, and increased amount of money and faster approval would help tremendously.
Mr. Brazeau.
Supply chain.
Yeah, I'll be quick. I'll just say that the NTCF fund has proven over the years to be very beneficial to the supply chain and certainly to the railways. So if there's a possibility or an opportunity to dedicate more of the view on the entire supply chain network, we would be certainly supportive of that, because we're all, we're only as strong as our weakest link in the supply chain, and the supply chain needs to be robust. But I would also add to Mr. Rogers' comment that it is about infrastructure. It's about investing in infrastructure. It's also about making sure that we have the right regulatory environment. And I think combined with that, we're hopeful that the money being put towards NTCF or the supply chain fund will be put to good use and rolled out quickly in terms of project approval.
Thank you, Mr. Brazeau. Mr. Montpetit.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Badawi. Just to respond to the NCCF funding, obviously we've got a lot of projects that are already on the go, some that are complete, many are on the books. I think spending the money wisely and understanding where it's needed is key for this to begin with. I think there's a lot of good discussion around that this morning. As far as moving forward, I think we need to start thinking about things a little differently. We talked about transportation parks. One of the things that you've mentioned yourself regarding what you're looking at doing in the Niagara Peninsula, I think looking and exploring other options and thinking differently what we have is key. Lastly, I can't emphasize this more, data, metrics, and information are also key to the supply chain. Visibility and getting visibility through information, I cannot stress anymore, is probably one of the most important factors that we could be working towards and spending funding and moving funding towards. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Badaway. Prochainement, nous avons
Mr. Barcelo Duval, you have the floor. 2.5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. My question is for the Montreal Port Authority. Earlier in your remarks, you emphasized the importance of certain projects, including the extension of the Port of Montreal, the importance that this has for the port. Well, what you brought up, though, or what you did not speak to, was the environmental conditions, and also how that would affect the wildlife, and in particular fish. What that impact would be. You understand that there would be quite a lot of impact on the fish in that area. On the fish, on the fish habitat, and also the dragging that has to be done for the construction of the extension has to be done in such a way it's going to affect the sediment, the synergy of the floor of the St. Lawrence. Normally, when you do dragging for construction, you use these huge automatic shovels, and that causes a great deal of disruption. This is a method that has been used in the Contrecaque region, and I wonder if the Montreal Port Authority has established some sort of priority for the type of dragging that they're going to be able to, of dredging, I should say, that they are going to be able to use. Well, we haven't established a methodology yet for the dredging, but naturally, of course, with our private partners, when the time comes, we have to look at the best technology that will have the best results for the environment. And you talked about the sediment and the disruption of the sediment. You're quite right. There are conditions that we have to respect to be able to move ahead with the project to accomplish that project at its last stages. Well, I do have another question for you, because there are some environmental groups that have told us that they feel that the compensation plan that is being offered to them by the Port of Montreal, the Montreal Port Authority, is not satisfactory. Are you aware of this? And the evaluation, the impact assessment that was done for that. Unfortunately, we will not have time for the answer to your question. Thank you, Mr. Dagenet.
Backrack, the floor is yours. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we've heard from several of our witnesses today about the rail blockades that occurred in 2020 and the impact those had on the supply chain. Now in Northwest BC, where I live, CN is the primary rail provider. So I'm going to ask my questions to Mr. Lab. Now, when the rail corridor, when the rail line was built through much of Canada, it did not obtain any sort of consent from First Nations, or, in many areas, there were no treaties. And today, when I travel to Indigenous communities in Skeena-Bulkley Valley that have the railway line running through their territory, I hear so many stories of the impact that the construction of the railroad had, and stories about the impact that rail transport continues to have on their communities. So my question is, for CN specifically, how many resources? I see your operating profit in 2021 was $5.6 billion. How many resources does CN invest in the project of reconciliation?
Thank you for the question. I don't have the exact amount or details, but we're constantly at many levels of the organization engaging with stakeholders and the communities and the First Nation for sure, whether it is from the specific departments, policies, and or daily operation, as we have employees in all those communities working and living there. So it's an ongoing effort to be a good corporate citizen.
Now, working with Indigenous communities is very unique from working with other kinds of stakeholders. Could you tell me how many individuals in your corporation are dedicated to working with Indigenous communities?
I don't have the exact amount, but we do have indeed dedicated employees to work with these communities. For sure.
Would you be willing to table that information with the committee, both the amount of finances that are dedicated to the project of reconciliation and the number of individuals in the company that are whose jobs are dedicated to working with Indigenous communities?
Yeah, I will bring it up internally for a follow-up.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving perhaps to, and I'll stay with Mr. Labbe. And I see my timer's going off. Does that indicate my time has run to an end there, Mr. Chair?
You have 7 seconds, Mr. Bachrach, if you're capable of doing something with that 7 seconds.
You know what I'll do? I'll cede my time to my next round. How about that? I'm trying to get better at keeping it concise. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach, and I think that Mr. Dowdle will very much appreciate that. So, Mr. Dowdle, the floor is now yours. You have 5 minutes and 7 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I also want to thank all the presenters today. It's been fantastic to hear their statements about what's happening with Canada's supply chain. I just want to go back, I guess, to one of the questions we had from one of my colleagues before about, I guess, the effect of the pandemic on our supply chain. So it certainly, from what I'm hearing, wouldn't be the number one issue. A lot of it seems to be, from what I'm hearing, is climate change. All of those items are things that we need to look at. But what I've heard consistently through this presentation from pretty much every individual, like Julia said, regulatory process and infrastructure. It's infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. And I've heard that from many presentations that I've had as well. It's just saying that we need to do something so that these products can move in our country a lot quicker than they are. So I guess my question is, in the last 7 years, for example, or something, because I hear it consistently, I think whether it's the federal government, provincial, and municipal, the amount of red tape that's required to get a process moving. So these other issues, like I said, they're off on the side and they're going to happen. But I think the key is the infrastructure part. So I guess the question I want to anyone that's on this, pretty much probably everyone can answer. Do you think it's still too difficult to move projects ahead in a timely fashion, and has it gotten any better? Because each time we say we're looking forward to federal partnerships and funding and things of that nature, and I'm just wondering, that's all fantastic, but if you can't get those shovels in the ground and that many roadblocks, are we moving ahead, or is that the main issue of why we have a sore supply chain is the fact that no matter how about all these other issues is we just don't have the infrastructure that's there? And I guess the follow-up too, if you could quickly add, what are the easy things that we could do, in a fast way to hopefully get products moving a lot quicker?
I'll jump right in and maybe just my answer to that would be that the sense of urgency to get shovels into the ground is only going to increase. So if there are delays, we have to address those delays. If there's regulatory holdback on certain projects, we need to be better, because extreme weather conditions is going to continue to be a major challenge, and we have to respond more quickly. And I think, one of the things we saw through COVID-19 is we were able to work very closely, the private sector and the government, to reduce regulatory burden to make sure that things got done a lot quicker. And I think there's a lesson to be learned coming out of the pandemic, is that we can make things happen faster if there's a sense of urgency.
Are you optimistic that will happen? That, because I can tell you from my perspective, people, the frustration levels there, we're years behind already. Yeah. We have to act like the pandemic is on the issue of infrastructure.
I agree with you on that statement. We have to act with sense of urgency.
Perfect. Is it anybody else want to comment on the fact that timelines and is it improving? Because I personally think that's the biggest crutch of what we're seeing here.
Mm-hmm. I would add, if I may, certainly CP supports any infrastructure projects that improve supply chain capacity, efficiency, resiliency, and many of the projects that are being applied for under the NTCF are exactly around these areas. I would say that I can't really comment on whether things have improved or degraded, but I would say that our perspective is that there does need to be a greater sense of urgency. So here's an example. The Port of St. John applied almost a year and a half ago for funding under the NTCF to support a capacity expansion project that is urgently needed to create capacity, and it will be a significant improvement in supply chain resiliency and capacity. And so a year and a half later, that application is still in waiting. So there's an example of a long time frame that hopefully can be addressed.
Okay, and then just one quick question again. I know that the Liberal government's going to have an increase in the carbon tax, the latest one. And are you expecting that to impact Canada's supply chain? Anyone wants to jump in? I guess that's a no. Crickets. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I think I'm out of time, actually. That's just 5 minutes on my watch.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dowdle. Next, we have Mr. Iacono. Monsieur Iacono, la parole est à vous. Vous avez 5.
You have 5 minutes, Mr. Iacono. Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I thank all of our witnesses this morning. Mr. Dagenet, could you explain how the COVID crisis and the problems of the supply chain disruption have had an impact on the Montreal port? What have you done about that, and what has worked and what has not worked? Thank you. In fact, the COVID crisis did have an impact on our workforce, and there was a drop, of course, during the first months. And after that, I would say that the majority of the impact was managed with synchronicity between exports and imports. Freight and the ships, as you have heard, have had a predetermined schedule months in advance and weeks in advance because we synchronize with the potential arrival or the forecasted arrival of ship XYZ. And that took into account issues in ports elsewhere. I'm sorry, Mr. Dagenet, but can you select, please, what your microphone at the bottom at left, you can select the headset. No, am I not speaking now? It would seem that you have not selected the microphone, the proper headset. We hear you, but you are very muffled, not with the clarity that is acceptable for interpretation. Is it better now? I've just selected it, and it is indeed much better now. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Dagenet. I will add the time to Mr. Iacono's time. As I was saying, essentially, that there were some issues that occurred with respect to our workforce. And secondly, we had to deal with it. We had to cope with it. Our clients had to cope with the delays in the ships and arriving at port. They did not arrive at the forecasted time according to the schedule. And, you know, they have a very tight schedule. They have to live with that. And it's very precise, just like a watchmaker. And that was something that was necessary to cope with. Thank you, Mr. Dagenet. Was there something rather unique or peculiar with respect to the difficulties you faced at the Port of Montreal in comparison with other ports? If so, are you talking about the supply chain? Yes. What is the difference between the Port of Montreal, the Montreal Port Authority, and other port authorities? Well, it's not really a problem. It's really an opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, the business model that we propose in Montreal allows for a somewhat different behavior. Our business model is one of destination, and so our ships arrive loaded, and then we unload them very quickly. And that offers us the possibility of providing for a scheduled trucking as well. So there is less movement of empty boxes or containers, and that reduces the freight difficulties in both directions. So given this opinion that you've just shared with us, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you didn't experience the same crisis as was experienced in some ports in the United States. Is that true? Yes, it is true. Okay. Have there been any changes in the regulatory framework, or could there be such changes that would allow your operation to be more fluid? Yes, absolutely. I think that no regulatory framework would allow us to protect ourselves against an economic shock like the pandemic. But nonetheless, Montreal has gotten through 2 work stoppages and a conflict with the longshoremen, with the dock workers, and that has allowed us to keep nonetheless, our sea borders open. We were able to operate. And with respect to that, I think it's important. We have a position on that. Now, anything that deals with innovation of logistics chains, I spoke to it a little earlier in passing, that deals with the need to identify a change of destination. Thank you, Mr. Iaconu. Thank you again, Mr. Dagenet.
Mr. Muse, you have 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
I think instead it is actually I.
Oh, well, Ms. Gladue, then the floor is yours.
Very good. I'm going to start with Monsieur Labbé. We've heard that the various rail companies are investing a huge percentage, reinvesting into infrastructure. But if I look to even small communities like mine in Sarnia-Lambton, we're having difficulty even maintaining the existing infrastructure. And the federal government has provided, millions, but not billions in terms of studying and everything. But it looks to me like we need some kind of a major investment and cooperation and leveraging of money in order to grow, to do the Quebec-Windsor corridor, to address, resiliency in our supply chain. Can you comment on what we really need from a capital priority point of view and how much you think that will be?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So, as you said, the railroads invest a lot of money in the infrastructure to maintain fluidity, resiliency, and increase capacity. As Mr. Brezo said at the start, it's in the tune of 20 to 25% of the revenue is put back into capex, which is quite significant. And it is always based on, like I said, ensuring we stay ahead of the demand. So try to be always before the capacity crunch comes in. As it relates to the amount of money required in that specific area, I can speak to it. I cannot speak to that, but we're always open to work with our customers and supply chain partners to create synergies and projects that will benefit the transportation of goods.
Yeah, I think these are nation building projects, and really to get to the next level of competitiveness, we absolutely have to partner between federal government and all of our rail partners. Monsieur Montpetit, you had spoken about the problems with the trucker shortage. And I know that this was made worse by the vaccine mandates that were put in place in Canada. And President Biden actually exempted truckers that were alone in their trucks or companies that had less than 100 employees. And I wonder if you think that it would have been good, considering that Canada had negotiated as part of the roadmap that Prime Minister Trudeau would match what was happening in the States, that he should have negotiated that reciprocity to at least help the situation with the trucker shortage.
I think the trucker shortage is a much bigger picture than that. The trucker shortage is, if you looked at across the country right now, you've got provinces such as the ones, a lot of them are impacted, but more specifically Ontario, BC, and Alberta. You have truckers retiring. You have truckers leaving the workforce after all this that we've experienced, including what you've outlined. And you have people not entering the workforce. One of the studies I saw, and we had the BC Trucking Association present at one of my meetings here back in February, there's probably, if not more at this point, we have a shortage of 25,000 drivers across the country. So it's a much bigger picture than just a COVID specific problem. It has been an ongoing issue, and it continues to grow. And we don't seem to have any solutions right now for it. I think there's a focus on it. And from what I understand, the government and the feds have taken some initiative around it in conjunction with the provinces. But it is an overall workforce problem that we have. It's no different than some of the other ones that maybe the railways and some of my members are facing also. But the percentages seem to be much higher within the trucking industry.
Absolutely. And certainly, this is not the time to have 10 to 20% of people, unable to work when everyone who has vaccines or not can get and transmit COVID. So I think there is an opportunity there. Mr. Dagenet, in terms of the Montreal ports, we had heard that with all the growth in export markets, that it would be a good idea for us to expand the number of international ports that we would have. Do you agree with that? And do you think that the experience from the Montreal port could be used to help do that?
Thank you for the question. I think ports play a role, sometimes even a complementary role to each other. So definitely having a network of ports to service our exporters or Canadian exporters is absolutely necessary. I'm unclear whether we actually need more ports per se. We already have 17 port authorities, as you probably already heard through testimonies, all across Canada. So we already have a large amount. We certainly need in certain aspects in certain regions more infrastructure, hence our answer and our expansion project in Contrecoeur in order to meet that demand in due time. Because as Mr. Montpetit mentioned earlier, I believe infrastructure is a long lead time process, whether it's to get financing, approvals, authorization, and then after that, eventually building it out and commissioning it. So those are long view issues and certainly long view projects.
And what specific infrastructure would you build?
Here in Montreal?
Yes.
Okay, so for us, we're building an additional container terminal because because we believe that we're going to be running out of vacancy in the next few years. But as I mentioned in my testimony, aside from building additional infrastructure, we're not building what we used to build 20 or 30 years ago. We are building the 21st century type of infrastructure, hence shore power equipped terminals that can handle trucks that require to be connected to our power grid. We recently signed an agreement to create a green corridor, hence having LNG as a source of power for ships, but also ammonia or methanol. So greening our equipment and making sure that it's more resilient to climatic change is absolutely necessary for the next generation of equipment.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that's my time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gladue. Next, we have Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers, you have 5 minutes. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of our panelists today. Been very interesting to hear you identify, I guess, the major causes of supply chain issues across the country. When we talk about all the issues identified with fires in BC and Western Canada, floods, extreme cold, when we look at, I guess, the national picture and the international picture, we hear people talk about supply chain issues caused by COVID. And I guess a very simple question, basic question for any of you who would like to speak on this. Assuming we're living in a world where COVID had not existed for the past 2 years, would we have the same supply chain issues? And maybe Mr. Brazeau and Mr. Montpetit or others can comment on that.
Mr. Brazeau, would you like me to go or would you like to go?
You've got the microphone, David. I'll follow you with pleasure.
All right, that sounds good. That's a good question. I do believe if you took COVID out of the picture, we would still be in a very similar situation we are now. There may be a supply chain imbalance. We would maybe have a less of an imbalance than what we're seeing right now, and some of the effects to that. But if you looked at the climate piece, if you looked at a lot of the disruptions that we've had already experienced here in the last 2.5 years between blockades, climate, labor disruptions, etc., those are most likely all going to happen, COVID or no COVID. Hence, we were and I outlined it before, this started, the issues that we have seen started well before COVID, and they're going to be here well after COVID. That's my perspective.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for the question. I would agree with David. In fact, the rail blockades occurred prior to COVID, and we saw the resulting effects of the blockades for weeks on end. One of the things that I think, we learned some great lessons from COVID, and there could be lessons that will help improve the supply chain going forward. And I mentioned some of the regulatory, the relaxing some of the regulatory issues and the regulatory relief that we had was very helpful and was very important because in the case of railways, we were considered essential services. We continued to run from day one of COVID. But we had to make some adjustments, and all the railway companies made some adjustments, but also the federal government also stepped up and provided some regulatory relief. So I would say that it goes well beyond COVID, but there's some lessons to be learned from COVID that could carry us forward and maybe improve the supply chain going forward as well.
Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate those comments. Mr. Montpetit, you talked about in your commentary about a supply chain review. So what's been done in the last 5 to 10 years, particularly in your jurisdiction, I guess, to resolve supply chain issues? And have these attempted solutions improved the situation any?
So if you looked at what in the West and specifically out of Vancouver, there has been some work done in the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years. Some of it has been successful. And I think anything that we do contribute as far as financially, National Trade Corridor funding, et cetera, will definitely benefit, will help without question. Every little bit helps. The question is where we're spending the money and are we getting the best bang for the buck, for lack of a better word. And I guess my second question around that, and it was just to circle back one of the comments earlier on, I think to manage the scorecard as far as how we're doing with the funding would be important to see. I saw an update, it was a while back, I think it was back in December actually, on where we are for approved projects versus completed projects. And the timelines to these, some of them are much quicker, or we can call it low-hanging fruit. And a lot of them are major infrastructure changes that needs to happen. So I think what we've done out here, we've made some good steps. I do believe there's a lot of work that needs to be done yet. And on top of it all, we had the fire and flood situation that just made things more challenging, but also opened our eyes up to what we need to do, not now, but in the next 50 years to actually manage something like this again.
Mr. Chair, another quick question. Maybe Ms. Hardy or Mr. Lab could comment on this. Has the rising price of oil and gas affected the supply chain for you? And if so, how so?
Well, thank you for that question, Mr. Rogers. Fuel is obviously a significant cost for us at the railway. And so it does have an impact on our business and on our customers' shipments for sure. And we're watching it very closely and, doing our best to protect ourselves and our customers from the rising costs that are associated with fuel.
I echo the same comment as John.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, with time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers. You have 6 seconds left, so you were perfect on time there. Much appreciated. Prochainement, nous avons Mr.
Next, we have Mr. Barcelou Duval. You have 2.5 minutes. You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Mr. Dagenet. In the Bloc Québécois, my colleague Mario Beaulieu, who is at Pointe de l'Île, not far from the Montreal station, has looked at the issue of the electrification of the port installations. It is something that perhaps would allow for a better type of project that respecting social adaptability. So what has the port done with respect to electrification? Are there projects that are in the future? Yes, thank you. Thank you for your question. With respect to the Contrecoeur extension, the first contacts with our partners in terms of getting the authorities to proceed. We spoke about electrification to see whether or not it would be possible for the equipment, for the measures, the handling equipment, and also for the wharves. All of that would be put in place. That's a commitment that was made then. Also, with respect to the framework that is being built, as I've said, there has been major investment made recently for port installations, but our lessees also have made changes, renovations in terms of electrification, in terms of the delivery of the containers, in terms of refrigeration, and also for getting on to the grid with Hydro-Quebec. Also, we put forward a rather aggressive strategy. We created a system of about 25 connections that would allow for some 25 million tons of GHGs. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I have another question to ask you. I'm sort of disarmed by your responses because if your commitment to French is, Mr. Labbé, not at the same level of a commitment that exists elsewhere in other corporations, maybe I'm wrong in thinking that it's not at the same level. Well, thank you. CN's commitment is, of course, very clear, and it's something that will be dealt with very soon. I did not mean to project indifference. Thank you, Mr. Labbé. Thank you, Mr. Barcelo-Duval.
Mr. Bachrach, you have 2.5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll pick up with Mr. Labbé, and my apologies if I was mispronouncing your name earlier. I want to talk a little bit about dangerous goods. And as you're aware, this is a big concern for communities in our region, certainly contributes a lot to the economy of Northwest BC these days. But we've seen 2 liquid propane terminals developed on the West Coast, and the BC government just greenlit a proposal for a 3rd terminal. Now, at a very high level, just so I can understand this, would you say that the risk to communities along the rail corridor increases with increased volumes of dangerous goods being shipped through their communities?
I cannot answer this one. I'm not sure. I think there's many mitigating factors to manage the risk.
Okay. Are you familiar at all with the transport of dangerous goods by CN in Northwest British Columbia? Okay.
I am, yeah, in general, yes.
Okay. So are you familiar with the specific train-specific routes assessment that was done?
I'm not familiar with the assessment itself, but I'm aware that we're doing some actually, we're doing many of those assessments, but I'm familiar with the route. I'm pretty confident this is the one to Prince Rupert, right?
Yeah, that's right. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that there's been a dramatic increase in the transport of dangerous goods along that rail corridor. And I'm wondering if there has been any kind of regional risk assessment in response to concerns that communities have brought forward.
I cannot speak of a specific either concern that were brought up or a specific assessment that was done, but we do a risk assessment multiple times on an ongoing basis, depending on a trade corridor or the commodity we're looking to move. And it includes the lane itself, the train handling, and the rail car design.
Okay, I don't feel like I'm getting too far with that line of questioning. So I'm going to shift back to climate disclosure. And I did note earlier the 2020 commitment by CN to the recommendations from the task force on financial disclosure of climate risk. Now, the federal government is moving towards mandated disclosure of financial risks due to climate. The task force recommendations are for voluntary disclosure. Does CN support the federal government's direction around mandatory disclosure of climate risk?
I cannot comment on this specific topic. I would have to follow up internally.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bachrach and Mr. Labbé. Next, once again, we have Ms. Gladue. Ms. Gladue, you have 5 minutes. The floor is once again yours.
Thank you, Chair, for the hat trick. We'll go back to Monsieur Labbé. All the provinces have lifted all of their vaccine mandates pretty much. And so we have unvaccinated 3.5 million Canadians intermingling with vaccinated Canadians everywhere except on planes and trains. And so would you support the lifting of the vaccine mandate for trains?
But we're following the government mandate right now that is there. So
of course you are. But if they decided to drop it, would that help your business?
I don't believe it would be a dramatic change. There was indeed an impact of the vaccine mandate, but this is not the biggest impact to the supply chain right now.
Very good. I want to talk a little bit about labor impact in supply chain resiliency, because we did hear that there was a shortage of workers in many places, mariners, and perhaps in trained employees. So if I could start with Mr. Dagenet at the port, what are the labor things that you're concerned about, and what should the federal government do, if anything?
Thank you for your question. Well, during the COVID, we obviously had the issues filling all our position because of the sanitary and the hygiene issues with related to COVID and the isolation and in some cases. But going forward, we are definitely concerned about the availability of labor for the Port Authority itself. Because we are in an environment that offers conditions, good working conditions, but very atypical schedules. Working weekends, nights, and shifts is less and less attractive. So we're trying to make sure that we are also creating an environment as well that meets the expectation of new laborers and new workers that are requiring more work-life balance, a more stable work-life balance. So we are keeping time with that. Yeah.
Good. And Mr. Rogers, can you comment, about any of the labor concerns that you would have?
Our members are struggling to get personnel and good trained personnel. People seem to be departing the industry overall. It's a significant challenge to bring people into the workforce. We talked about the trucking shortage that is occurring. And it's not just in that area. Again, the supply chain is not necessarily a very attractive place to work at this point in time. Significant challenges. We've talked about the supply chain being broken really for the past 2 years. It's just not an enjoyable place to be anymore. So we continue to find struggles in really all areas of the supply chain overall.
And Monsieur Brazeau, do you have some comment to add?
Yeah, I'll just echo with what Monsieur Dagenet said. The railway sector is finding it more and more difficult to attract people to come into the railway sector because it is a 24/7 environment. It can be a very harsh environment, but it can also be very rewarding. The railways provide a very rewarding career opportunity. So I think what we need to do as an industry, and we've started doing that, is to explain and promote the benefits of working in the railway sector so that people understand what it really means and the opportunities that they would have in order to build a successful career. So we're doubling our efforts on career awareness, career promotion, because we need to attract more people into our industry as well.
And Mr. Montpetit, the same question for you.
Went off mute. Yes, our members are struggling just like everybody else, depending on location where they are. If they're in smaller communities and that is the primary source or one of the primary sources, it's perhaps a bit easier. But when you look at some of the other areas, you're competing with several other industries out there, and I think everybody already touched upon it. Some of it is I would call it 9 to 5 work, where you have a normal work-life balance, and then yet a lot of it is going to be on shift. And if you're working shift work, it's much more difficult, especially if you're away from home the whole bit. I think everybody right now is experiencing it. The question is how do we move forward, and what do we do to move forward? Do we look at other policies that we have in place as far as immigration goes and all that sort of thing to help bring more people into Canada and help backfill the vacancies that we currently have?
All right. And Ms. Hardy, any comment from you on this?
Yes, thank you for the question. Definitely, it's a very hot employment market right now. We have managed to maintain our staffing levels at essentially the same level as we were a year ago. We have a very aggressive hiring plan this year, and some of the issues are around. We're hiring in a lot of small communities. Cost of living can be very high in some of those small communities, so we're actually taking steps like building accommodations in some small communities to house crews that we would be hiring into the area. So taking, pretty significant steps to make sure that we are able to hire into the vacancies that we have.
And to all of you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Gladue, and thank you very much, Ms. Hardy, for that response. Our final round of questioning goes to Ms. Koutrakis. Ms. Koutrakis, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to all our witnesses for their wonderful comments and this very interesting discussion today. I'll begin with Mr. Rogers or Madame Kuzelievich. What are the best performing countries in terms of freight transportation, and what can Canada do to learn from their success?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and thanks for raising that. I think countries around the world are all struggling to a significant extent. North America is struggling. Europe is struggling in many different areas. I would say Asia probably has probably the best supply chains overall. It's due to the fact that they move much quicker on infrastructure requirements and needs overall. They have significant efficiency in their port operations. And for the most part, they control, most of the world's exports. So they're in control of where the rest of the world are sort of relying on them to get the product to them. So that would be my answer to that question.
Do you think that regulations may impede our efficiency compared to China's regulations, or nothing to do with that?
I would say absolutely. And we talked about that from really getting down to the infrastructure. I'm going to just back up a little bit on that infrastructure. We have the National Trade Corridors Fund, but what is the national trade strategy in order to spend that money? We need a strategy, a long-term strategy on where that money will be invested. We shouldn't be going through people bidding for new projects. We should know what they are. Our infrastructure has been discussed on this panel through many different individuals. I'm going to say it's fragile at best, and it's broken when it disrupts it. And we've had significant disruption over the past 2 years.
Thank you. And ma dernière question, c'est pour Monsieur.
My last question is for Mr. Dagenet. I'm very happy to see you once again, Mr. Dagenet, on Zoom this time. What change could be brought to the governance of Canadian ports to ensure a better performance and to follow environmental needs? Thank you for your question. I think that when you look at certain examples and you look at the international level, what works well for them, you realize that the same way that you deal with the internet through networks, so those ports that have networks are better organized in their countries, and we could create strategic alliances with them. We could create a type of complementary synergy. There is greater flexibility with respect to that, and if there were that flexibility, that would increase our resiliency here in Canada at the ports. And what do you think about the American ports? Could we become more competitive with them? Absolutely. The federal government has made major investments in port installations and also in terms of capacity. We saw this past weekend $1.5 billion is going to be earmarked for rail improvements to the ports, and we know that there is that availability to achieve the mandate and to improve the needs of to meet the needs of Canadian importers and exporters. It's the whole logistic chain that interests me. That's an interesting future, and that is something that would probably put us ahead of many of our competitors. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do I have any time left? Madame Tracas? What? 40 seconds. Thank you very much.
Question for anyone. What, in your view, are the biggest bottlenecks that impede the efficient movement of freight, in your opinions, and anyone? I guess we don't have that many big bottlenecks.
Well,
we do.
I'd say, I'd say just to bounce back on what I just commented on, just disjointed supply chains, folks that are working for their own chaînon, their own little piece of the pie. If they don't see a whole, if they don't see it as an entire from origin to destination, I think we're losing some of that on efficiency.
And I think in looking around at also, if we have a problem like we did this past year in BC, or last year I should say in BC, having other options available at your fingertips is going to be is a huge problem right now. You've got a few major ports that dominate and destinations that dominate, and not having other contingencies in place, we found out we can really hamstring the Canadian economy, and those are things we need to look at in the future.
Merci beaucoup, Madame Koutrakis.
Thank you, Madame Koutrakis.
Monsieur Montpetit. Colleagues, thanks for your great questions today, and I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of this committee to thank our witnesses for your testimony and your time today. It's been very helpful. One last thing I'd like to ask for all of our witnesses, if you have any additional information that you'd like to share with us or follow-ups to the responses that you've provided, by all means, do send those our way. We're going to make sure that our analysts include those in the information that they review while putting together the final report. I also had a request by Ms. Gladue to ask and encourage all of you to hire any of the Ukrainian visitors, if you will. We're not formally calling them refugees at this point, but visitors. They are coming to Canada, and they are looking for employment. And with that, I want to thank you all once again and adjourn the meeting. Merci.